think it might be a good time to get started. So folks will join us as they come. But thank you everyone so much for being here. My name is Daniel Harvey. I'm the artistic producer and community director for Opera Parallel. This is actually our first official Bullhorn event. The Bullhorn being our community programs, the community programs of Opera Parallel. This is our first event of the season, so we're very excited to have you all with us. Yeah, we have a wonderful lineup tonight of panelists. This is the first of our creators conversation. One of the great things about being a contemporary opera company is that we get to the creators, the composers and librettists of the opera because they're all still alive. So we're very lucky to have them with us tonight.
Okay.
So to introduce, I'm just going to
Okay.
To introduce firstly, we have our wonderful composer Kenji Oh, and as well as librettist Kelley Rourke joining us. And leading them in conversation will be Opera Parallel's General and Artistic Director, Nicole Paiement. So over to you, Nicole.
Thank you, Daniel. And thank you so much, Kenji and Kelley, for joining us on this conversation. Kelley is calling from the East Coast, so it's quite late for her to be joining us. So thank you, both of that. And before we begin the conversation, I just want to say to everyone that Hands-On Opera is a very special and unique program for Opera Parallel, one that is very close to my heart. We started this program in 2013. We've done over 5 commissions of new works. And basically the program really fits our mission of trying to make opera for everyone. Basically because we involve people, students, people from the community, not always students actually, people from all ages to participate in the opera rather than just being spectators of the opera. And by engaging our community to be involved in doing it rather than sitting, it changes the dynamic of what opera, the relationship between what opera can be for people. And we really believe in that program. It also gives opportunities to emerging composers or librettists and creatives to give their first hand at opera. For example, I had met Kenji many years ago and really respected his work as a composer, and felt that he was a great storyteller, even while writing music that was not operatic. And so we thought we'll give him his first opportunity as a librettist, as a composer, excuse me, of opera. So it is Kenji's first opera. And what we try to do also with this program is when we have someone who is new at the art form, to collaborate, to combine them with a librettist that perhaps has more experience, so they can both play on each other. And so Kelley, who has a lot more experience as a librettist, has been a wonderful partner to Kenji. So we really appreciate that. And we also, with this program, try to really tell relevant stories, enhance, also make it more diverse composers, librettists, so that we really diversify what opera can be to the community. So I'm very proud that Opera Parallel has this program. So maybe to begin this conversation, I would love to talk to both of you, Kenji and Kelley, and ask you tell us a little bit about the process of how we created this opera, the Emissary. Maybe a brief timeline of how this project happened. Maybe we start with you, Kelley, because normally it starts with the libretto.
Sure. Well, normally it does start with the libretto, and in some ways it did, and in some ways it didn't. I was just thrilled to get an email from Nicole about this project, and I've known Nicole a long, long time, and have been such an admirer of Opera Parallel, and I've just said, when can I get to work there? Because I'm such a fan of Nicole and Brian, and have worked with them both in many ways, and was just very excited to get to work there. And she reached out and said, we have this program, Hands-On Opera. We have a wonderful composer. We have a story that he has chosen. And do you think you might be interested in writing the libretto? So I immediately went and found some of Kenji's music, some really gorgeous, gorgeous choral music, read the book, and said, absolutely, sign me up. So that was the beginning. Just the idea of telling this story with this company, with this composer was a very exciting thing. And then Kenji and I just started talking. We Zoomed about every week, just kind of talking about the piece. And then as I would start writing, I would just share a little bit and we would talk and really just kind of making that time to talk about whatever we had going on, which sometimes was about where the piece was going, but also, it was such a strange time. So trying to get to know each other as we wrestled with this strange and beautiful story was the beginning.
Kenji, do you want to, how, in terms of...
Oh, the choosing story was difficult actually. At the beginning, the theme is so important, too important that I really hard time deciding, finding the material. And Danielle sent me a list of climate change, sci-fi kind of books, list of the books. And the Emissary was on the list. And I remembered that the Japanese original book, Kentoshi, was my reading list. And I immediately started reading the book in Japanese first. And I loved it. And it was instant decision to pick this one from the list. And... Sorry?
No, I said I remember that we had asked you actually on what subject matters did you want to write an opera on, just in terms of relevant stories. What did you like to write? And ecology was one of them. That's why we had sent you that list. I remember now. Yes, very well. Mm-hmm.
More than 2 years ago. Ooh.
That's right. So then we did the libretto reading, and but then the collaboration of you really started from that top of doing that initial decision of writing on this story and that relationship. So it's the relationship between a librettist and a composer is very important. And if well, at times operas have not been as successful because you can feel that there's not quite this connection that really merges together. And the best operas are always when you feel that these two artists almost become one artist in creating this piece. Tell us a little bit about how you developed that relationship and what it's like.
We primarily worked together through Zoom, and I think it was a new way of communicating in this society, not just opera writing, but after COVID era, we started working on Zoom a lot, and I think it was new way of society of being, and we used that way to make this opera, and I think it was weird but interesting. And it was not half year, but few months after I met Kelley through Zoom. We finally met in person. She visited me in LA, and it was really great time, and I think it was very important time for creation. What do you think, Kelley? Oh, you're muted.
Doing most of the preliminary work over Zoom is, as you say, weird but interesting, right? And I am a big believer of in collaborators spending time together in person and what that means. And I love to make time to spend with my collaborators, definitely time to work, but also I think you're doing very important work when you're having lunch. As you just get to know each other as human beings. And we didn't have that option, although, again, we made time to really talk a lot over Zoom. And so I was not able to get to LA until right after the libretto reading. So we were just past the halfway point. And I said, okay, Kenji, I'm cashing in some points. I'm coming to LA. I'll see you. And there was this very nice text or email. He's like, what are we going to, I'm not sure what this means for us to be together at this point. I was like, I'm not sure either. The timing is all off, but I think we should be in the same room. And he said, okay, we'll figure it out. And when I showed up, he greeted me. It was nice to see each other in person. And he said, you know, I got all the things to make my father's dumpling recipe. What would you think if we made dumplings? And so we made some dumplings. And then we talked through the piece, and I think learned so much. um, just having that time together, you know, making an opera is like it's an act of creation. And so to just have time together and share food, I think made it so much easier to bounce ideas off of each other as we talk through the piece. Boy, look at the flour all over my pants. I'm a mess.
Yeah, I think it's important to become a good collaborator, a good pair of collaborators to produce good piece.
Yes, and you feel one of the things that so for those of you who are new to to the emissary, I know many of you have been following the process, but there was the beginning. We did a reading of the libretto, so just the text, basically read it as a play, and then had some changes that were done from there. But Kenji was already there, giving his thoughts and being, as a composer, hearing that sound world of the words only. And then after that, Kelley went back and reworked certain things. And then we had the second level where we actually did a workshop with the music, but Kelley was still there hearing her words into the music. So they were able to collaborate when even the light is perhaps more on the text and then on the music. If the collaboration between the composer and the librettist, if they're there in the room as you're doing these workshops, it will really change the piece. Let's talk a little bit about when we did that second workshop which with the music that happened. I guess it was last fall around this time last year that we did that. Which is a very fortunate thing that we were able to do that. Tell us what you learned from doing that and how important it was in the creative process. Maybe we can start with you, Kenji.
Opera is, yes, for everyone, yes, but still very special, and writing an opera is very different than writing for other form of music, I think. It's very different when the performers are singing and acting, and other things makes it very different. Anyway, especially because this is my first opera, I learned so much through this workshop how it works, how score becomes wave of sound on the stage, or opera singers, and my ability to imagine operatic stage in my head is significantly increased through the workshop, and so I could polish the work with this increased ability. And yeah, I learned so much. Music needs a lot of more space than the concert music, and you need to think about how they move, imagine the staging and lighting, and inspired by them. It's so very different than other form of music that I needed this first experience of opera to polish after workshop. Yes.
Kelley, I know that there was some changes that were done, and we can come back to Kenji's changes afterward. But what about even if you had a workshop just with the libretto, how did the second workshop of the piece affect your work on the process?
Yeah, I think, you know, the biggest thing with the musical workshop that I think both of us learned is about pacing. Kenji mentioned this a little bit, you know, where does it need space to breathe? Where do you want the energy to keep going up? You really can only learn that when you're in the room with an audience, you know, and when I'm in a workshop, I'm watching the audience as much as the stage, you know, like when are people leaning forward? When are they kind of fidgeting? How do we keep the energy going the way that we want the energy to go? So there were a lot of small things that we adjusted for pacing. Sometimes those adjustments were musical only, but often it was about words. You know, one of the big things that we learned was we need to take a little more time to usher people into this landscape that is this futuristic landscape that's unfamiliar. So making sure we spend that time to set them up. The other thing I will say that we learned, the really happy discovery, often for a workshop, you know, you're finding the people who are around and available and they sing the roles, and then sometimes someone else is cast for the premiere. And I think the greatest, happiest discovery of the workshop was Bradley, who we said, oh my gosh, we love this performer so much. He has just the right like depth and sadness, but also so much lightness and joy. And to see him sing through the role, I think all of us immediately said, he must be Yoshiro. He is perfect in every way. Please, 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 is he available? Can we cast him? So that was an amazing discovery.
Can you share with the audience a little bit what Yoshiro's role is, and maybe also just a quick idea of the story, so as we're progressing, we can be clearer on that?
Sure. So The Emissary is a work of speculative fiction, which is a little different from sci-fi. You know, sci-fi can be very inventive and crazy, but speculative fiction is really built on kind of extrapolating from known facts. Like, so it's in the future. It is in a future Japan where kind of continued disregard for the natural world has resulted in some kind of disaster. We're not exactly sure what. And, you know, plants and animals have undergone extreme mutations. It's not really safe to spend a lot of time outside. And of course, because human beings are part of nature as well, they have mutated too. And the old are going to live forever after this accident, and the very young are very sick. And which just it is terrible. It is so sad. But what I will say about this book, what's amazing is that there is a lightness and joy, because it's about this relationship, and it's about the relationship of a little boy, Mume, and his great-grandfather, and how they are going forward in this world. And of course, the great-grandfather has a lot of regret and sadness for what is lost, because he remembers another time. But the boy doesn't really remember another time. And he is just like a kid, just, you know, excited and full of wonder. And can we do this? And they're making a life in this kind of wounded world together. It's hard to describe it without making it sound like, oh, it's going to be a very dark, hard evening. And there are dark moments, but I think the overall effect is a lot of hope and light.
And so Bradley plays the role of the great-grandfather in that story, on that. Yes. And there are a lot. One of the things that is very interesting, I think, about this opera is that Kenji and Kelley conceived, so we know that there is a children's chorus or a youth chorus in that represent different characters. But what is nice is that also they have given minor roles to some of these choruses. So at times, some of the singers that are in the chorus are going to walk out and become these other characters, which gives opportunity for these young singers to not only be participating in a chorus in an opera, but also getting their first solo role as a minor role. And you can really see how that makes them. There was one young woman in the first rehearsal we had with them last Saturday who was beaming because she had this one little line to sing a solo. She just and she thanked everyone at the end for the experience, and it was the first rehearsal. So the way that the libretto is conceived to give various opportunities is a wonderful thing that you have both created in that way. So I'm going to move on. Oh, yes. Actually, one of the things also that was great about before we move on to, and maybe I can just play a little bit of the workshop for our audience that's there, but we also did something which was to ask the students. We had a panel, actually, Kelley had asked that we have people that are younger audience that come and hear a run through and then give their thoughts on the piece and ask the questions. So we would get feedback not only from your typical professional musicians or dramaturg and that, but also really having a reaction from some of our youth. What did you learn from that, both of you?
I thought they were really smart and clever. The story is not straightforward, but complex and ambiguous that I was a little worried if they could get, but they were getting like everything deep, and I was surprised, actually. It was a really great experience.
Yeah, it's interesting that this is the 5th piece that I've written for family audiences. And I often find, sometimes there is a lot of like, will the kids understand? Is it okay that the world like has some strangeness? And I find often the kids, their imaginations are wide open and they are more ready to go with a strange story sometimes than the adults who are worried that the kids aren't going to get it. So I kind of suspected and hoped that would be the case, but you're always still nervous. So it was a nice affirmation that, yeah, the kids, their minds were wide open and they immediately, were noting all of the ambiguities and saying, well, it could be this or it could be this, and that's really cool, or maybe it's even this. They were not bothered at all that as audience members, they were called on to use their imagination and fill in some of the gaps. So that was really fun to have that dialogue.
Yeah, it was a great idea to ask them. Thank you for suggesting that. We can play just a very short excerpt of that workshop to show you what that was. And actually, Bradley Kinnard that Kelley was referring to is singing in the back there on the left. This is not a professional video whatsoever. It's done in a classroom somewhere, but it gives you a little bit of an idea for those who are new to opera on how, you can just get together people. Right now, we didn't have a chorus, so we had some adult singers singing the chorus part, but gives you an idea of just how we worked a little bit. So we'll play you for just a minute or so.
You have a gray hair, another, and so it begins.
A gray hair, another, great grandpa, we are twins, twins! We'll form a silver-headed league, just you and me! Ta-ta-ta-ta, 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 ta-ta-ta-ta. We'll be the silver-headed league, ta-ta-ta. Your hair is silver and you do fine. Silver-headed league, fall in line, ta-ta-ta-ta, ta-ta-ta. Fall out. More fallout! Fallout!
That word is no longer used. Say, my teeth fell out.
My teeth fell out! My teeth fell out! 1, 2, 3!
Thank you, Daniel.
Right,
So that was a moment where actually the teeth of Mume are falling out. Anyway, well, you'll see the opera. You'll figure that out. But that was a little bit. It shows you a little bit how we were working at the time. So can you maybe talk what changes were done following this workshop into the piece? Maybe
So-
Kelley. or go ahead, Kenji. Yeah, sure.
So as Kelley said, we took the feedback and observed the reactions and made a change for the pacing. So a lot of section is extended a little bit, and some section is cut it, and I added overture. I think that's the biggest change. And we added the information that is needed to convey what we want to convey. What else did we change?
I mean, I think you mentioned the big ones, and then there were lots of, small nips and tucks like, oh, that word's not coming out. Maybe we need to not put things on top of each other right there. Just a lot of things that are in some ways minor and not interesting to talk about, but I hope their effect will be major, all in service of the clarity of the storytelling.
So when I received the new score, I love the fact that there was an overture, and you hear the ocean, you hear the water, you really see the set musically on that. Can you talk, Kenji, a little bit about the instruments that you use, especially in the percussion instruments, and how you created that overture, that prelude to set the stage to this story?
After the workshop, it was so inspiring experience, and I drew this drawing. The illustration that represents the music, and it was ocean, small ship, and oh, you have a picture? And dragonfly flying around. And since I have the experience on the film scoring, and I composed a lot of music to film and TVs, that I often see music. And what was that question? Sorry.
The question was, when I got the new score and I heard the orchestration of how you set the mood, and you could see with my ears, I could see the set, I could see the ocean, and so I just wanted you to talk about that orchestration.
Yes. Yeah. So this vision came first, and I put sound on it, and that sound was sound of waves and the ship horn. I heard that, and immediately I thought of making some horn ship with some instrument, and I thought about trombone at the beginning, but after workshop, Nicole, you said this piece deserves more and allow me to add one more instrument, remember?
Yeah.
I decided go for a Piero ensemble, which is flute, clarinet, percussion, piano, violin, and cello. And I wanted to make that horn ship sound with trombone, but I changed it to clarinet, bass clarinet. I think that image of the horn ship and ocean was really stick to my mind and affected to the orchestration. And I use this percussion instrument called ocean drum, and that is shaped like this, like big tumbling with some beads inside, and you move it like this and make wave-like sound, and that instrument will be there.
Yes, for those of you who know rain sticks from Daniel's part of the world in Australia, and that it's a little bit like that, but it has sand right in the so it creates this sound of wave. You can, if you have a good percussionist and he plays the instrument, it really starts to sound like waves and ocean with the percussion instrument. And when I saw that, and that's how the piece begins now, just hearing the nature, it just sets that so beautifully. And then hearing the boat, the horn on that with the piano does this big cluster with it. It just creates already, we wouldn't need to have a set. We could just see that. So it's very beautifully done. I'm really excited by that. Can you talk about the other instruments used in there? Like what other instruments to use in the score that you feel that after the workshop you thought, oh, I'm going to use these instruments?
Instrumentation was actually almost decided before workshop.
Okay.
Flute was one of them, and I wanted to express airy character to express, wind with dandelion fluff and dragonflies, and I thought there was a lot of wind element in this book, so I chose flute. And clarinet was for bass clarinet, ship horn, and I wanted to make mellow kind of world with clarinet. And for percussion, organ drum was one of the very initial instrument I was thinking of, so I needed percussionists.
Yes.
And violin and cello, it's very versatile instrument. You can bow or pluck. It can produce so many kind of sound that overall palette very rich. And I think Pierrot Ensemble, this flute, clarinet, percussion, piano, violoncello, is like the tiniest orchestra, and so colorful, and I like it. And so making colorful is so right for this opera, I think.
It's very true. I find sometimes that you can get almost as much color out of a small ensemble like that one on a part than you can in a smaller chamber orchestra. And you did it very well on that for sure. Kelley, when you heard Kenji's music, your words put into Kenji's music, what was your reaction of that? And tell us how that feels to have words put into music.
I mean, it's always so exciting. I try to write words that make a container for music. I don't hear specific music, but I hear kind of, I don't even know how to describe it. I have some vague musical ideas, maybe just about general tone. And sometimes, a simple version is what we just heard, the Silver-Headed League. The character of that was, obviously, I could never imagine what it exactly was the way Kenji did it, because he's a great composer and I am not. But the character was exactly what I expected. And then there are other things where it's just a really pleasant, amazing surprise. It's like a wonderful kind of fun game of a handoff of creation, where you make your thing and then you hand it to the next person, and then of course Kenji puts notes around it, but then you hand it to the performer, and then suddenly it takes on a new dimension, which again might be exactly what we expected or might be something that we could never have imagined. And then the staging comes around it, and it's again the same thing, like that's exactly what I thought, or oh my gosh, I never thought of that. So it's just a wonderful kind of continual handoff.
Has it ever been in your career that you wrote something and then you heard it and you thought, that's not the music for my words?
Definitely early on, I had a couple of those, well, no, that's not how it goes. And what I have learned, because I don't have all the answers, I have ideas. What I have learned is to say, that's so interesting. Tell me about how you got to that choice. And sometimes the composer, and most of the time, the composer will tell me how they got to that choice, and I'll say, oh, that's so interesting. I have to adjust my thinking, but I kind of like that. Now, there have been times where the composer says what they were thinking, and I'm like, well, here's what I was thinking, and I'm having trouble, and then you have to negotiate.
Mhm.
I think in the best scenario, you're not trying to have A or B win, but like, okay, if I'm firm on A and the composer is firm on B, is there a C?
Mm.
Is there, if I can, if the
Right.
composer can understand what I was going for and I can understand what the composer was going for, and we can't quite get there, like, is there a choice that neither one of us has thought of on our own?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense actually, to find that third place if you can't agree on where it is there like that. Kenji, when we first talked, this was your first opera. You were excited to do it. Now, how do you feel about your next opera? Has it opened the door of other possibilities? And are you already thinking of some other operas? Where are you with that art form?
I got a commission from Portland Opera to write my second opera. It will be premiered in September next year. So I'm working on it, and after, not still going on. This experience is still going on, but after this experience, to write an opera, it's so good, I reconfirmed that the love for storytelling, that my music is often programmatic, that has a story in it, but no words, and I really like making contour and make a shape of story, and writing opera was really fun doing it, and I'm so excited for the premiere, and I started looking for new material that I like to make into opera. And actually, Kelly and I was chatting before this meeting, and talk about looking for new material. Let's do something.
Wow, that would be great if you did another project together. That would definitely be wonderful. I know that I want to open the floor for us to have a conversation with the people that are there, but there's one element of this opera that I think is very, very magical. And it is the fact that there is a canon that dragonfly canon that was written. And I remember when we talked about the possibility of maybe having something that we could not only engage the people on stage, the young people, but maybe our audience could join. And that actually we're hoping to incorporate the audience singing that canon at the end of our production. Can you talk about that canon? And maybe we'll have our audience hear a little bit of that canon afterwards. But if you can talk about how that came about and where it sits in the piece.
And just to jump in, for those who are maybe not have not gone to music school, canon is another word for, around. Like
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah.
In French, it's a canon. We say that, so I thought everyone knew what it was. My apologies. Around. Thank you, Kelley.
Yeah.
That melody is so important in this piece. Writing this Dragonfly song was my very first idea. While I'm reading book, while I reading this section that this character Suiren sings Dragonfly song, it was already, oh yeah, I'm going to write Dragonfly's melody. So this was the very first material I wrote for this opera, and it was not canon. And somehow, interestingly, Nicole and Kelley separately suggest use of canon in this opera, and I thought it was really appropriate and perfect idea to put canon at the end for final climax. And this melody, Dragonfly melody, was not canon, but it was already almost canonizable melody, and it just took 5 minutes to make this canon, make this melody into canon, and it was meant to be. I felt that moment. Oh, this is meant to be.
I remember we were talking and he's on a Zoom meeting and you said, I've got it. I have it right now. You had it right away. It came very naturally. It was a very special moment of this creation. Maybe we could we could share with you that beautiful melody, because that will entice everyone. I see some of my lovely friends on the screen that are all the way from Dallas. Maybe they'll fly just to come and sing with us this wonderful melody. This will be sung by younger people, but this was at the workshop, so we have an adult singing it right now.
Dragonfly, how do you fly across the wide blue sea? Dragonfly, what do you see there across the sea? Dragonfly, how do you fly across the wide blue sea? Dragonfly, what do you see there across the sea?
Dera? Thank you. Apologies for the bad video and sound, but you can, I think, feel that beautiful melody that is there. And you can imagine just bringing, these rounds are things that when we talk about things like storytelling, which is at the root of who we are as human beings, I think rounds in music were something that were so early on in part of how we started to do more than just one, that we shared music. And so to get an audience to share around at the end of a performance, I think will be very powerful. So if you are coming to the performance, we have actually put the song on our website so you can look at it and learn it. It will be in the program. And before the performance, I'll also come out and rehearse it a little bit with the audience so you can feel that you can join us, which I think will be a lovely way to share music together. So I'd love to pass the baton back to Daniel and for him to open the floor for questions. And I want to say how I appreciate you all coming, and I see many of my friends on the screen right now, and I want to say a warm hello to all of you for that. So Daniel.
Thanks so much. And just before I open the floor to the Q&A, I just want to give a quick shout out and mention that, of course, thank you all for being here and supporting Opera Parallel in whichever way that you do. Opera Parallel relies on the support of our patrons, and if you are able to contribute to our annual giving campaign, operaparallel.org/donate is the place to do it. That allows us to develop amazing works like this and support the amazing artists like Kelley and Kenji, and create this community and the cross-cultural exchange of stories like the Emissary. So with that, I'd love to open up the floor to anyone who would like to answer or ask questions of the panel. Feel free to unmute yourself and just ask the question, or put it in the chat and I can ask it for you, whichever you'd prefer. Here's one that just came in the chat, and I saw your hand as well, Leonardo. I'll ask this one first and then come to you. So this is from Amy. She asks, can you speak to the process of adapting a work in translation? How much did you reference the translation and how much did you reference the original language? It's a great question.
It's a great question. And, you know, I don't read or speak Japanese. I read the book in English. And it was, first of all, the translation is, you know, I can't speak to how it compares with the Japanese, but it is a beautiful literary work on its own. The amount of wordplay in the English is wonderful. And this translator works with Yoko Tawada a lot. So I worked basically from the English version, but I had such a wonderful resource in Kenji who had read the book in Japanese. And, you know, anytime you're adapting a book into a libretto, you're picking very judiciously. Even a small book, you can't represent the whole book. So as we figured out what scenes we wanted to focus on to tell the story, Kenji was able to go a little more deeply and say, well, you know, actually in the Japanese, it's this word, and here are all of the shades of this, and it's interesting that this was chosen. So I had a wonderful resource once I had narrowed the book down to go a little more deeper into the original.
I remember that where we think we made a better choice of translation spot, which is Miss Nemoto. And original book in Japanese, the way Yoshiro calls Miss Nemoto was awkward way, like Miss Nemoto. And English translation version was just Nemoto. And there was get rid of this awkwardness, and we added this awkwardness by saying Miss Nemoto. And I think we were better here.
Great, thank you. Leonardo, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, this is for Kenji. You said this is your first opera, right? And that you learned a lot about the process of writing an opera. So, about the practicalities of the staging, did you have to add any bars of music for scene changes that maybe you hadn't thought of? Right, the timing of everything that goes on stage, the stagecraft, or somehow this came naturally to you? I mean, if you are you an opera goer yourself?
I think it's the one of the obvious difference of the opera music that I was kind of aware, trying to be aware of that what's going on the stage. That I don't think I had to add anything for the transaction or anything. We had transactional music already there. But some point I had to make some more space than I thought. Yeah, that kind of spot here and there, but mostly I think I did a good job on it.
And sorry,
No,
your and your use of theatrical timing, and by this I mean, for example, it's a very traditional piece, Tosca, right? One of the things I like about Tosca is how Puccini, in the second act with Scarpia, how he manages to time what happens in the scene perfectly well, right? So this first time for you doing this, your theatrical timing, how did you work this out? This is one of the things I would very much like to know about every opera composer, right? Because it's the theatrical effect is very important. So, what did you learn about it? How do you learn it? How many times did you have to rewrite a scene to make it effective, theatrically effective?
I think it's a really interesting and difficult question to answer, and opera is so special that opera was out of my scope or sight kind of as an artist. So that's why this is my first opera. So I don't have so deep knowledge about opera or literature. Maybe you know better.
No, 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 no.
And uh sorry, I forgot what I was saying.
Well, if
Mm,
I could
Yes.
just, and I think part of that is something that comes in the libretto process, which is not to say that I'm doing it all myself. It's part of the conversations. But before any music is written, we're looking at the scenes and at the pacing of the scenes and like, okay, this is bustling. And now we're going to transition to another scene. So all of that gets mapped in the libretto, like, okay, we're going to be in this busy scene, and then now we know this scene is going to recede and we're going to see the desk go forward. So before any music gets written, we've talked through all of the transitions and we basically know what's going to have to happen. Now, do I say we need 6 measures at quarter note equals 80? No, but we've kind of seen it together. And so then Kenji takes that information and times it out, and we know where the big dramatic beats are. And so that's where, because we've done that work, then he can bring his craft as a composer, to fill that out, which I think you've done really beautifully.
Thank you.
And I would add to that. From what over the last few years of working with Kenji, it's become clear that he's a very visual composer, which is kind of an unusual combination for a medium that is all oral. So, but how we showed the images earlier, you drew the prologue before you composed it, which is fascinating to me. And I remember you talking about how you would visualize a stage while you were composing as well, and I think that sort of has come across in the final work as well. And it also translates with our director, with Yayoi Kambara, who's directing the production. She's a choreographer, primarily. This is her first opera directing engagement. But I think that as well has translated through into the movement and the direction that is coming across on stage as well. So there's that magic combination of all these little bits of the different artists contributing to create what comes out on stage. Magic of opera, right?
Yeah.
Yes, and thank you, Daniel. And I would also add that, this is what is so special about working with contemporary operas, in that we are also exploring new ways to create opera and to make it a very collaborative, perhaps even more collaborative way of creating new works than it used to be. So it's not just the maestro composer at the end that does that, but really everyone bringing together an element of it to basically create a new way of creating opera, and also what you present on stage. Yeah, great question.
yeah.
Thank you for these
Through
questions.
this rehearsal, Yayoi told us about the direction, and I get inspired by this description of how stage is going to be, and I fixed for it, and it was really interesting and great collaboration experience.
Great. So we probably have time for 1 or 2 more questions, if anyone wants to throw anything else in the mix. I would love to know your dumpling recipe, Kenji, if add that to our website as well.
Actually, I should take that opportunity to say that we have a beautiful website on this piece, and there's also one of our collaborators with whom we work, Michael Mohammed, who's prepared and enhanced the experience. So when you go on our website, you'll be able to see various ways to prepare to come to this performance, and maybe we can add the recipe to the dumplings on that enhance your experience. But it's a wonderful way to enlarge the experience that you will get when you come to hear the opera.
Right. Well, if there's no more questions, final call. I'm just gonna bring up one more little slide here. I can show you some images of our beautiful cast and creative team. So we have, of course, Kelley and Kenji, and Nicole who's conducting the piece. We also have an associate conductor for this piece, Jaco Wong, who'll be conducting the 1 p.m. performance on Saturday the 28th. And in the lead roles of Mumei and Yoshiro, we have Angela Yam and Bradley Kinard. And as I mentioned, director Yayoi Kambara, with her creative team of Matt Linzer, who's scenic and costume designer, and Spence Matubang, who's a lighting designer. And then we're working also with the Lick Wilmerding High School Chorus and their director, Tony Osaro. And we're very fortunate to be working with all of them, and they're doing a brilliant job. Also, quick shout out for this coming Saturday, we have a open rehearsal, so you'll be able to see all of the work of this team in real life. It's this Saturday at 1 p.m. It's at the ODC space, which is on 17th Street in the Mission, ODC Theatre, and which is also where we're performing the opera. So this is Saturday at 1 p.m. All the details are on our website, and you can register there to get all the information as well. And of course, final shout out for tickets for the performances. October 27 and 28 are our performances. All the ticket details are on our website, operaparallel.org/the Emissary. The opening night, Friday the 27th, is sold out, so that's your cue to get your tickets for the Saturday as soon as you can, and before they sell out too, because we're pretty sure they will. So yeah, we hope to see you at either with the open rehearsal this Saturday, or if not, at one of the performances on the 27th and 28th. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and yeah, we'll see you soon.
Thank you.